At face value, a book allegedly exposing a paedophile ring of apartheid-era cabinet ministers in Port Elizabeth, including sex trips to a tiny island in the 1980s, makes for some riveting reading. But as evidence to the contrary emerges, was the real-life story, The Lost Boys of Bird Island, accurate? Derek Watts reports.
It was a story that shocked South Africa and reverberated around the world when it was released in August last year. The Lost Boys of Bird Island is billed as a shocking expose of a violent paedophile ring involving National Party ministers and young coloured boys in the 80s. It rocked the country as the latest dark secret to be revealed from the apartheid era. It alleged an appalling abuse of power that extended to Minister of Defence General Magnus Malan, Finance Minister Baron du Plessis, although he wasn't named in the book, and Environment Minister John Wiley. They supposedly commanded a South African Air Force helicopter to fly them and their underage victims to Bird Island. It was co-authored by Mark Minnie, former narcotics policeman in Port Elizabeth, and investigative journalist Chris Steyn. Jacques Poe, author of The President's Keepers, has been very outspoken about the book.
When I read the book, I realized that there's not a hell of a lot of evidence in the book. And I found it astonishing that the authors, for example, doesn't use the words alleged or according to our evidence or people have been telling us that. They state it as a fact.
The paedophile ring was said to be orchestrated by one man, police reservist and businessman Dave Allen, who had a guano concession on Bird Island. Then Dave Allen committed suicide, or was he murdered? Then John Wiley committed suicide, or was he murdered? And then another shock 8 days after the book hit the shelves. Mark Minnie was found dead, a gunshot to his head. It was an apparent suicide, but was it really? Was it in fact a third murder by agents of the old apartheid regime, staged to look like a suicide? Private investigator Wouter de Swart was commissioned by the Foundation for Human Rights to investigate the death as well as the alleged paedophile ring. Wouter worked closely with Chris Steyn, investigating all possible leads.
This is the path he followed with the rope over his shoulder. He then entered the hot house over here.
Okay.
And I'll show you the inside. Over one of these installations here, there were workers inside, which is not normally the case on a Monday morning. But for some reason, they were early that morning. So he turned around, still with the rope over his shoulder, and went back to the house. A few minutes later, they heard a gunshot. Minnie also did extensive research on how to commit suicide by using a weapon.
Chris Steyn says the findings were inconclusive.
Derek, that is simply not correct because the pathology report says self-inflicted based on the gunpowder, etc. My investigation and facts that I've proven forensically shows he planned it himself. So how can that be inconclusive?
Private investigator Mark Janssen van Rensburg was critical to Wouter's investigation. He'd worked with Minnie in the 80s and seen him the weekend before he took his life. How did you know Mark Minnie?
I've met him in the 80s. When he was part of the narcotics unit in Port Elizabeth. A hard worker, a hard drinker, a hard player. At the time, excellent bluesman. Thereafter, when he got involved with the unsavory characters, people that would go into Africa and steal and rob people. There was an incident in Klerksdorp where they took diamonds from the Nel brothers, within millions, and soon thereafter, Mark disappeared.
Minnie starts the book with an interview with a young boy in hospital, terrified and suffering from severe anal injuries. His statement describes group sex in a flat, implicating a Port Elizabeth diver, Dave Allen, and the Minister of Defence, Magnus Malan. Poe discovered there were 3 versions of the book on Minnie's laptop after he died.
The most important event in the book is the confession of Allen when Minnie takes him to the police station after he arrested him for pornography and sexual abuse. In the first version of the book, he makes no confession. In fact, Mark Minnie says he was quiet, he didn't want to say anything. In the second version, he names one person, John Wiley. And then suddenly in the book, he sang like a canary. He said he wasn't going to go down on his own. And he mentioned John Wiley, Magnus Malan, and then the third minister who was identified afterwards as Baron du Plessis.
We asked NB Publishers and the co-author of the book, Chris Steyn, for their side of the story. She hasn't responded to numerous emails and phone calls, and the publishers would only respond to our questions in writing. At the time of publication, and still today, NB Publishers regard the information contained in the book as credible and of public interest. We were always aware of the difficulty in not having access to documentary evidence contained in the docket, which was unlawfully removed from Minnie's possession. We strongly deny that NB Publishers fabricated any information or facts presented in the book. Minnie was directly involved in the police investigation, and Steyn spoke to at least 25 sources. Janssen van Rensburg had accessed Minnie's emails during the investigation, revealing that the authors, the publisher and journalists worked together after the book went on sale to find proof of the allegations made in the book. On the eve of his suicide, he wrote, "I'm not ready to do radio shows just yet. Some ex-military guys have posted on social media that they're attempting to establish my whereabouts. They believe for the time being that I'm in China, and I'm busy assisting with an investigation into the Blue Combi and a house in Wittelsbos." This raises two important issues. Why, after 30 years, was he not ready to answer questions about the investigation? And why were they still looking for concrete evidence after the book had been published? The publishers say it's because the docket was stolen and he didn't want to reveal he was in the country. But given Minnie's alleged shady criminal connections, there were a lot of people looking for him. Voter interviewed one of Minnie's main witnesses, a young boy called William Hart, who had allegedly identified Malan and Wiley. William was angry about how much his story had been distorted when he read the book, but was open about his relationship with Alan when he was 15. Were you ever on Bird Island?
No,
Never.
never in my life. You know how old I was when Dave got Bird Island?
How old were you in 1987?
27, 26.
Not a boy.
He was a boy. He was under 18 in the middle 70s, when neither Magnus Malan or Baron du Plessis or John Wiley were even ministers.
Did you ever meet Magnus Malan personally?
He was the Minister of Defence. Everybody knew him.
What about John Wiley?
I don't know him. I heard a lot.
The publishers say William Hart has changed his version in some respects.
William Hart tells Mark Minnie how he was taken to Bird Island and how the sexual abuse took place on Bird Island. And then in the third book, it all becomes Wittelsbos.
Wittelsbos became the key link that Steyn and Minnie made implicating the third minister. But 5 days after the book was published, they were still looking for evidence. This email was sent from the editor to Minnie and Steyn. If Mr. X or some of the victims can identify the house and we can confirm the house still belongs to BDP by doing a deed search, then it points the finger directly at him. This is the holiday home of Baron du Plessis, the third minister implicated in the paedophile ring. It's near Wittelsbos, about 150 kilometers from Port Elizabeth, where the alleged abuse of the young boys took place.
Well, you know, the past 8 months are the worst 8 months of my life.
Baron du Plessis was Minister of Finance from 1984 to 1992, serving at the same time as Magnus Malan and John Wiley.
And throughout my entire life, I've never had a leaning towards that vicious kind of crime. And all of a sudden to be hit that I am guilty of a crime that I've never even given some thought to in my life about the existence of it, and now I'm supposed to be part of it.
Baron, describe all the visits you made to Bird Island and who you were with.
I made only one visit to Bird Island. My secretary, she phoned me and she said to me that she'd received an invitation from the office of late Minister John Wiley, inviting me to the opening of a new quay. And that was the only time in my whole life that I visited Bird Island.
Were there any young boys transported with you in the helicopter or any of the other helicopters?
Not at all.
Did you ever meet this man called William in the book?
No, never. Never. My visits to Port Elizabeth were few. I have never been in social circles in Port Elizabeth at all.
Since Mark Minnie's death, the police have investigated the possibility of a paedophile ring involving apartheid ministers during the 80s. So you might expect that the only living minister implicated in this abuse would have been questioned. Barent, have you been interviewed by the police?
No. I will welcome that, because then it will force an issue to a point where it can stop hovering above me like the darkest cloud that anybody could wish for.
The Wiley family have lived under a similar cloud for the last 30 years. They investigated Wiley's suicide and the paedophile allegation thoroughly when the story first hit the press in Playboy magazine. The article was later retracted. Wiley visited Bird Island 3 times, accompanied by fisheries officials on 2 occasions and on the fishing trip with du Plessis and Milan.
The cops have not found any evidence to link any of the cabinet ministers to the sexual abuse of boys.
Poe revealed everything he'd found out about Minnie to the publishers 6 months ago. He told them of Minnie's criminal past and faked certificates of qualification. He noted that Chris Stein's ex-husband was Lieutenant Colonel Eben Barlow, a former operative of the Civil Cooperation Bureau, the apartheid death squads.
The last phone call I received from Christy Stein, or Christine, she called me at night time. And she used to call me frequently. She said, "Mark, do you believe I killed Mark Minnie?" I said, "No, Christy. You know who killed Mark Minnie? The book killed Mark Minnie. And you, Christy, the publisher, is going to answer for these allegations in this book."
The publishers and Stein distanced themselves from Voter and sought to discredit him once he informed them that they had no factual basis for the allegations against the ministers. Despite this, Voter, like Stein, continued to follow every lead.
I am a cop. When it comes to my work, I'm apolitical. Believe me, if I found any evidence whatsoever that either of the gentlemen or anyone else in this story was involved in pedophilia, I would hang them on the post myself.
It is clear when you look at the emails that he had reservations about the book. He told the publishers, "We have no concrete evidence," and yet they went ahead and they published.
NB publishers say they stand by the book and its authors.
What I find extremely difficult to understand is how people can get away with that kind of thing for so long.